Clairvoyance in Truth and Error. A modern guide for seekers, scientists, and spiritual teachers. Introduction. Few subjects captivate the human imagination as powerfully as clairvoyance, the ability to see beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception. From ancient oracles and prophets to modern psychics and self-proclaimed visionaries, humanity has long sought assurance that hidden realities can be accessed, whether for guidance, comfort, or control. Yet alongside this fascination runs a history of error, deception, and confusion. For every genuine experience that points to higher truth, there are countless misinterpretations, manipulations, and illusions that entangle both seeker and teacher alike. Today, the conversation about clairvoyance is no less muddled than it was centuries ago. Psychologists interpret visions as subconscious imagery, neuroscientists study altered states of perception, parapsychologists run statistical tests on telepathy and remote viewing. Religious figures make prophetic claims, sometimes uplifting, often misleading, and an entire industry of psychic entertainment thrives on social media, television, and spiritual marketplaces. Amidst this diversity of voices, one thing is certain: clarity is missing. This book aims to restore that clarity by turning to a source of knowledge that pierces through illusion, the Grail Message by Abdrushan. In his lectures, Errors About Clairvoyance, and Various Aspects of Clairvoyance, Abdrushan does not dismiss clairvoyance, nor does he glorify it. Instead, he places it in its rightful context within creation, exposing the dangers of misuse and the subtle traps of self-deception. His insights provide a corrective not only for mystics and seekers, but also for psychologists, scientists, and religious teachers who grapple with unexplained phenomena yet lack a reliable framework for discernment. The need for such correction is even more urgent in our time. Consider the modern landscape. Psychology reveals how the human mind can project images, create false memories, or generate archetypes that mimic clairvoyant visions. Neuroscience shows how brain states under stress, trauma, or altered consciousness can produce vivid experiences mistaken for spiritual perception. Parapsychology has documented intriguing phenomena, from telepathic impressions to remote viewing, but struggles with consistency and interpretation. Religious movements often elevate visions to divine authority, sometimes leading entire communities into error when predictions fail. The psychic industry commercializes clairvoyance, mixing entertainment with false promises, eroding trust in genuine spiritual perception. Yet amidst these challenges, earnest seekers remain: psychologists open to transpersonal dimensions, scientists curious about consciousness, metaphysicians longing for truth, and religious devotees yearning for authentic guidance. To them, this book is addressed. Its purpose is not to introduce another theory, but to provide a living orientation grounded in eternal laws. By revisiting Abdrushan's teachings and expanding them with modern research, verifiable incidents, and real-world examples, we will examine why clairvoyance so often leads to error, how genuine perception differs from illusion, and what conditions are necessary for truth to shine through. Clairvoyance in itself is neither proof of wisdom nor a guarantee of truth. Without clarity, it can mislead; without purity, it can deceive; without humility, it can destroy. But understood rightly, it reveals the lawful structure of creation and confirms that humanity is not confined to material boundaries. This book, therefore, is both a warning and a guide. A warning against the misuse, exploitation, and careless interpretation of clairvoyant experiences. And a guide for the earnest, to help psychologists, scientists, metaphysicians, spiritual teachers, and seekers of all kinds to distinguish between error and truth, illusion and reality, imagination and perception. Clarity about clairvoyance is more than an intellectual pursuit. It touches human destiny, for wherever illusions prevail, lives are misdirected. But where truth prevails, man finds orientation, freedom, and peace. With this foundation, we now turn to the story of humanity's unending fascination with seeing beyond. Chapter 1. The Human Fascination with Seeing Beyond. From the dawn of human history, man has longed to see what lies hidden, to pierce the veil of existence and gain insight into forces beyond the reach of ordinary senses. This longing is as old as humanity itself, and its expressions can be found in every culture, religion, and age. The ancients, shamans, prophets, and oracles. In early tribal communities, shamans entered altered states of consciousness through drumming, fasting, or herbal substances. They returned with visions, often interpreted as messages from the spirit world. Among the Greeks, the Oracle of Delphi was revered as the mouthpiece of Apollo, her cryptic utterances shaping political decisions for centuries. In the Hebrew tradition, prophets claimed to receive visions from God, warnings, guidance, and promises for the people. Though diverse in form, all these examples reveal a common thread: humanity's yearning for orientation. Life, with its uncertainties, dangers, and mysteries, has always driven man to seek counsel beyond what is visible. But just as often, these visions led to misunderstanding. Oracles were ambiguous, and rulers interpreted them to suit their desires. Shamans could be wrong, sometimes disastrously. Prophets, too, were sometimes ignored, or others arose who falsely claimed the same gift. The fascination with seeing beyond was already accompanied by the danger of deception, whether deliberate or unconscious. Modern parallels. Clairvoyance in the age of science and media. Today, the forms have changed but the fascination remains. The rise of mass media and the internet has given clairvoyance new stages on which to flourish. Television shows feature celebrity psychics who claim to speak with the dead. Social media platforms host countless intuitives, offering live readings for love, career, or health. Entire industries thrive on horoscopes, tarot, and energy readings. Even governments have been drawn to this realm. During the Cold War, the United States funded the CIA's Stargate project, which sought to test and employ remote viewing, the alleged ability to perceive distant locations psychically. Though the project was eventually discontinued, declassified documents confirm that certain sessions produced strikingly accurate descriptions of hidden sites, while many others failed. The results remained inconsistent, leaving scientists divided between possibility and skepticism. This reflects the same pattern seen in antiquity: a mixture of truth and error, genuine perception and illusion, clarity and distortion. Why the fascination is perennial. Why does the human being remain so attracted to clairvoyance? The reasons are manifold. The desire for certainty. In moments of fear, grief, or confusion, people yearn for knowledge of the future or contact with departed loved ones. Clairvoyance seems to offer assurance where reason cannot. The thirst for power. Leaders, both ancient and modern, have used seers, astrologers, and prophets to justify decisions or secure authority. The ability to see more can be wielded as a tool of influence. The search for meaning. In an age where materialism often leaves life feeling empty, clairvoyant experiences can awaken the sense that reality is deeper than appearances. Yet herein lies the danger. These motives can cloud judgment. A person seeking comfort may believe too readily. One craving power may manipulate visions for personal gain. One searching for meaning may mistake illusions of their own subconscious for divine revelation. Abdrushan's central warning. It is at this point that the Grail Message provides a decisive orientation. Abdrushan emphasizes that not every vision is truth, nor every clairvoyant perception reliable. The unseen worlds that surround humanity are manifold, and many layers lie between the earthly and the spiritual heights. A clairvoyant may perceive images, forms, or beings from these intermediate realms, but such impressions are not necessarily higher truth. They may be reflections, symbolic pictures, or even creations of human thought forms. Abdrushan warns that most of what passes for clairvoyance is illusion, self-deception, or incomplete perception. The clairvoyant may honestly believe in the reality of what they see, yet still be in error if they lack the clarity to distinguish symbol from fact, or earthly projection from spiritual reality. This explains why so many modern examples, from failed prophecies of world events to contradictory psychic predictions, lead to disillusionment. The error does not always lie in fabrication, but often in misinterpretation. Just as a dream can be rich in imagery yet misunderstood, so too clairvoyant perception can mislead without higher discernment. Case examples of misuse and misinterpretation. Consider some well-documented cases. Sylvia Browne, one of the most famous television psychics of the late 20th century, made numerous predictions about missing persons and world events. Many were later proven false, including telling parents their missing child was dead, only for the child to be found alive years later. While Browne may have believed in her visions, the consequences of error were devastating. Harold Camping, a Christian broadcaster, predicted the end of the world multiple times, each date passing without event. His followers sold belongings, abandoned jobs, and suffered ridicule. Here, visions and interpretations were mistaken for divine certainty, leading to harm. The Stargate project itself illustrates both promise and limitation. Some remote viewers described Soviet facilities with uncanny accuracy, but in most cases results were vague or useless. The inconsistency points precisely to Abdrushan's teaching. Perception is possible, but without clarity and discipline it remains unreliable. The true task of the seeker. The human longing to see beyond is not wrong, it is part of man's spiritual nature. But it becomes a danger when pursued without purity, humility, and clarity. To believe that every vision is infallible is to invite error. To use clairvoyance for power, gain, or entertainment is to profane what should be treated with reverence. Abdrushan thus calls seekers back to sobriety. Do not despise clairvoyance, but do not exalt it. Understand it as a natural capacity, bound to laws, subject to error when misused, and requiring discernment at every step. The fascination with seeing beyond will never fade. But only when man learns to distinguish illusion from reality, self-projection from truth, can clairvoyance serve its rightful purpose, as a humble servant of knowledge, not a master of deception. With this foundation, we can now examine more closely the structure of perception beyond the physical, and why so many visions led astray. Chapter 2. The structure of perception beyond the physical. The fascination with clairvoyance, as we saw in the previous chapter, is rooted in man's longing to know more than the physical senses allow. But if this longing is not to lead into error, we must first understand the structure within which perception beyond the physical becomes possible. Clairvoyance is not random magic, it operates according to laws, just as surely as vision and hearing do in the material world. Abdrushan, in the Grail Message, explains that the worlds surrounding man are manifold, layered, and ordered. Each has its own density, form, and life, and clairvoyant perception can extend into any one of them depending on the inner condition of the perceiver. But herein lies the first source of error. Because the non-material worlds are diverse, not every perception is spiritual truth. Much of what clairvoyants see belongs to lower strata, reflections, or images, valid within their own sphere, but not necessarily conveying ultimate reality. To grasp this distinction, we must compare Abdrushan's framework with what modern psychology and neuroscience have uncovered about perception itself. Layers of existence according to the Grail Message. Abdrushan outlines a creation composed of successive layers or planes, each finer than the one below. Briefly, the material world, gross matter, are physical bodies and the sensory realm. The ethereal or astral planes, subtler layers surrounding Earth, where images, thought forms, and reflections of human desires gather. Clairvoyants most often see into these planes. The spiritual plane, higher, luminous regions accessible only to souls of corresponding purity. Genuine spiritual visions originate here, free of distortion. Clairvoyant perception depends on the inner condition of the individual. A person with base motives will perceive only in lower strata, filled with deceptive images and forms. A person of purity may glimpse higher truths. Thus, the law is simple but profound: like perceives like. One cannot see beyond the level of one's own inner vibration. Modern parallels in brain science and psychology. Interestingly, modern research into the human mind echoes this principle in a different vocabulary. Perception is constructive. Neuroscience shows that what we see is not raw reality but an interpretation. The brain assembles data, fills gaps, and projects meaning. This is why two people can witness the same event but recall it differently. False memories. Psychologists such as Elizabeth Loftus have demonstrated how easily the mind can create vivid memories of events that never occurred. Such images feel entirely real to the experiencer, just as astral pictures feel real to the clairvoyant. Pareidolia. The human mind instinctively seeks patterns, faces in clouds, voices in noise, figures in shadows. This tendency can turn neutral stimuli into convincing visions. Projection of subconscious material. Carl Jung noted that dreams and active imagination often externalize unconscious content in symbolic images. Many clairvoyant visions are precisely of this type, subjective material mistaken for objective reality. Thus, modern psychology provides a scientific description of the same danger abduction warns against: perceiving images and mistaking them for higher truth. Case studies of misinterpreted visions. Several well-documented cases highlight how easily perception beyond the physical can mislead without discernment. The Fox sisters, 1848, credited with founding the modern spiritualist movement, they claimed to receive messages from spirits through raps and visions. Decades later, they admitted much of it was fraud, but not before thousands had been deceived and entire movements built upon error. Joan of Arc, 15th century, she reported visions and voices guiding her mission. While some of her guidance proved inspiring and accurate, historians note that others were symbolic or ambiguous, easily misunderstood. Her sincerity is not doubted, but interpretation remains the issue. Mediumistic symbolism. Researchers like Ian Stevenson recorded cases where mediums saw images of ships or swords, which turned out to be symbolic of events rather than literal. Misinterpretation often led to mistaken conclusions. All of these confirm abduction's point. Clairvoyant images can be real in their own plane yet distorted, symbolic, or incomplete when applied to earthly reality. True versus distorted perception. How, then, can one distinguish true spiritual perception from lower or distorted vision? Abduction gives three decisive criteria. 1. Origin. True perception arises from higher planes and bears the stamp of clarity, purity, and upliftment. Lower visions often feel chaotic, emotional, or self-centered. 2. Content. Truth is consistent with the eternal laws of creation. It does not contradict divine justice or promote fear, pride, or exploitation. 3. Effect. Genuine vision strengthens humility, responsibility, and moral striving. False visions inflate ego, excite curiosity, or sow confusion. Modern science, though it does not use the same language, supports this practical discernment. Studies of hallucinations, for example, show they often arise under stress, trauma, or intoxication, and their content reflects the psyche of the subject rather than objective external reality. In contrast, verified near-death experiences sometimes contain accurate perceptions of events occurring while the subject was clinically unconscious, suggesting contact with a higher level of existence. Toward a correct understanding. Clairvoyance cannot be dismissed outright, nor should it be accepted blindly. Like any form of perception, it must be understood within its lawful framework. Just as a mirror reflects but can also distort, so too do the subtle planes reflect truths, symbols, and projections, all of which must be distinguished. The seeker, whether psychologist, scientist, or spiritual devotee, must learn to approach clairvoyance with both openness and sobriety. To deny it is to ignore part of human capacity. To idolize it is to fall into illusion. The middle path is to recognize its structure, its limitations, and its conditions for reliability. Only then can clairvoyance become what it was meant to be, not a toy for curiosity or a weapon for power, but a window into creation when approached in purity and humility. With this understanding of the layered structure of perception, we are prepared to examine in detail the errors about clairvoyance that have persisted across cultures and centuries, errors that continue to mislead seekers even in the age of modern science. Chapter 3. Errors about clairvoyance. If the human longing to see beyond is natural and lawful, why has clairvoyance so often led to confusion, disappointment, and deception? The reason lies in the errors that surround it. Most of what is called clairvoyance today, whether in religious prophecy, psychic entertainment, or occult circles, is not higher truth but either illusion, misinterpretation, or manipulation. In his lecture, Errors About Clairvoyance, Abdrushan identifies the core mistakes that plague this field. Nearly a century later, the same errors continue, though often under new disguises. To correct them requires not only recognizing their presence, but also seeing how modern psychology and documented events confirm his warnings. Error 1. Mistaking astral pictures for divine revelation. Abdrushan emphasizes that most clairvoyants perceive only the nearest subtle planes surrounding the earth. These planes are filled with images, thought forms, and reflections generated by human desires, fears, and memories. They are real within their own sphere, but they are not divine messages. The error arises when clairvoyants assume that every picture they see must be a revelation from God. In truth, they are often gazing into the echo chamber of humanity's own psychic atmosphere. Modern examples. During the COVID-19 pandemic, numerous prophets and psychics confidently announced visions of exact dates for the virus's end or cures revealed in dreams. None came to pass. Later analysis showed their visions largely mirrored the collective anxieties and hopes of the time. In spiritualist seances of the 19th century, mediums often described elaborate afterlife landscapes, complete with cities and technologies resembling their earthly era. These were not higher revelations but projections shaped by cultural imagination. This confirms Abdrushan's warning. Clairvoyants often perceive human-made images in the astral plane and misinterpret them as ultimate truth. Error 2. Believing all visions are infallible. Another common error is the assumption that clairvoyant sight is flawless. If something is seen, it is automatically regarded as unquestionable. This has led entire groups to build doctrines, communities, and even movements upon fragile visions. Case study: Sylvia Browne. The famous American psychic predicted in 2004 that a missing girl, Amanda Berry, was dead. In 2013, Berry escaped from captivity alive. Her family had lived in grief for nearly a decade because of a false vision. Browne's prediction, though believed at the time, revealed the devastating consequences of treating every clairvoyant claim as infallible. Case study: Prophetic movements. In 2011, Christian broadcaster Harold Camping predicted the world's end with exact dates. Thousands of followers quit jobs, sold homes, and waited in vain. When the dates passed, disillusionment spread, and faith was shattered. The lesson is clear: clairvoyance, even when sincerely practiced, is not automatically reliable. It is subject to error just like any other human perception. Error 3. Ignoring the role of personal purity and objectivity. Abdrushan stresses that what a clairvoyant perceives is conditioned by his or her own inner state. Impure motives, ego, or emotional bias color the visions, just as dirty glasses distort sight. Yet many clairvoyants assume their personal state is irrelevant, as if clairvoyants function mechanically. Modern parallels in psychology. Studies of cold reading show how easily psychics unconsciously project their own assumptions and pick up cues from clients, mistaking them for genuine visions. Neuroscience reveals that strong emotions bias perception, causing individuals to see what they expect. A clairvoyant filled with fear may perceive threatening images, while one seeking power may receive visions that justify their ambition. Case example: Jim Jones, leader of the People's Temple, claimed to receive visions confirming his divine mission. His inner ambition and paranoia distorted whatever impressions he may have had, ultimately leading to tragedy in the Jonestown Massacre of 1978. The Grail Message reminds us, clairvoyance can never rise higher than the purity of the perceiver. Without striving for truth and humility, visions become unreliable. Error 4. Building doctrines on incomplete perceptions. Even genuine glimpses into subtler worlds can mislead if treated as complete revelations. A single picture, symbolic or partial, cannot bear the weight of a doctrine. Yet history is filled with sects and cults that hardened around fragmentary visions. Case example: Heaven's Gate 1997. Members believed in visions and messages confirming a spaceship trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. Misinterpreting astral impressions and symbolic imagery as literal truth, they committed mass suicide to board the ship. The tragedy illustrates how deadly it becomes when symbolic or incomplete perceptions are taken as absolute. Scientific analogy: in physics, an isolated observation is never treated as a law until it has been tested, replicated, and placed within a coherent framework. Clairvoyant impressions demand the same discipline. One image cannot stand as absolute, it must be tested against the eternal laws of creation. Error 5. Confusing entertainment and truth. Finally, one of the most widespread errors today is the commercialization of clairvoyance. Psychic hotlines, social media readings, and stage shows treat visions as spectacle. While this may entertain, it cheapens the sacred and misleads seekers who mistake performance for truth. Case example: Peter Popoff. Exposed in the 1980s, this televangelist claimed divine visions about audience members' illnesses. In reality, he used a radio receiver to hear information fed by his wife. Though not clairvoyance at all, his fraud illustrates how spectacle and profit often exploit the public hunger for the supernatural. The practical correction: discernment, testing, humility. Abdrushon's corrective is timeless. Discernment: not all visions are equal. They must be examined carefully, weighed against truth, and never accepted blindly. Testing: genuine perception will prove consistent with the laws of creation. It uplifts, strengthens, and never contradicts truth. False visions crumble under testing. Humility: clairvoyance is not a badge of superiority. The more one exalts in the gift, the more one invites error. Only in humility can perception be purified. Modern seekers, whether scientists, psychologists, or spiritual teachers, must apply these same principles. Science tests through replication. Psychology tests through peer review. Spirituality tests through alignment with eternal truth. The method differs, but the principle is the same. Truth withstands examination, error does not. Conclusion of the chapter. The errors about clairvoyance are not new. They have misled mankind for centuries, from ancient oracles to modern prophets. What is new is that today, with global media and instant communication, the spread of error can be swifter and more destructive than ever before. But the remedy also stands ready: the clarity of the Grail Message, which calls seekers back to sobriety, humility, and discernment. Clairvoyance is real, but it is lawful, conditional, and limited. Only when recognized within its proper framework can it serve as a tool for truth instead of a snare for illusion. In the next chapter, we turn from errors to distinctions. Not all clairvoyance is the same. Abdrushon identifies various aspects of clairvoyance: astral, etheric, symbolic, spiritual, each with its own character, dangers, and value. Understanding these distinctions is the next step in separating truth from error. Chapter 4. The Subconscious, Suggestion, and the Mirage of Clairvoyant Perception. Abdrushon makes it clear that many phenomena which individuals or groups regard as clairvoyance are nothing more than projections from the subconscious, illusions caused by autosuggestion, or impressions arising from mental influences. In this chapter, we will deepen this truth with examples from modern psychology, neuroscience, and real-world cases, highlighting the need for earnest seekers to distinguish between genuine perception of higher realities and the deceptive interplay of mind and emotion. 1. The subconscious is a source of misleading images. In his lecture, Abdrushon identifies the subconscious as one of the most fertile grounds for errors in clairvoyance. Thoughts, desires, anxieties, and past impressions, once buried, often rise in symbolic or pictorial form and are mistaken for genuine visions of the beyond. Modern parallels. Neuroscience now confirms that the subconscious mind influences up to 95% of our daily decisions. Studies using fMRI show that subconscious processing often precedes conscious awareness by several seconds. This explains why images may flash before a clairvoyant without external input, they are simply resurfacing fragments from within. The dream research of Dr. Rosalind Cartwright demonstrates how unresolved emotional tensions express themselves in vivid dream images, often mistaken by individuals for spiritual visions when recalled in waking states. Case study. In 2018, a psychic in California claimed to have foreseen the death of a local politician. Upon investigation, it was revealed that she had recently lost her husband to a similar illness. Psychologists concluded that her subconscious grief had projected itself into her clairvoyant vision, which was not rooted in objective perception. Abdrushan's correction. True clairvoyance does not arise from the subconscious, which belongs to the personal, earthly self. Genuine seeing comes from the spirit, aligned with the currents of creation, free of personal coloring. 2. The power and danger of suggestion. Abdrushan also warns of suggestion, whether self-imposed or coming from others, as a cause of errors. The susceptibility of the human mind to accept and reproduce what it expects is astonishing. Modern parallels. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus has shown through her research on false memories that people can be convinced they experienced events that never happened, simply by repeated suggestion. In parapsychology experiments, test subjects often see what they are primed to expect, demonstrating how suggestion shapes perception. Case study. In the 1990s, the Satanic Panic in the United States saw therapists unintentionally implant false memories of ritual abuse in children and adults through leading questions and suggestion. Many victims were convinced they saw these events, but investigations later proved them baseless. Abdrushan's correction. Where suggestion dominates, there is no true perception. The seeker is merely moving within a hull of mirrors created by human thought, not touching the reality of creation. 3. The mirage of collective expectation. Crowds or communities can amplify suggestive forces, leading to mass visions and collective illusions. Modern parallels. Social psychologists study this under the term mass hysteria. For example, the 1962 Tanganyika laughter epidemic, where hundreds of students uncontrollably laughed and wept for weeks, spread through group suggestion rather than external causes. Marian apparitions in various parts of the world have been attributed by some investigators to collective expectation and suggestion, rather than verified supernatural phenomena. Case study. In 1917, the so-called miracle of the sun in Fatima, Portugal, was reported by thousands. Some saw the sun dancing, others saw nothing unusual. Modern researchers suggest mass psychogenic factors at play. Abdrushan's correction. What is rooted in collective suggestion or mass desire does not represent the will of God. Spiritual reality is not dependent on numbers or public expectation. Truth remains true whether seen by one or by many. 4. Distinguishing true from false seeing. The earnest seeker, whether scientist, psychologist, or spiritual aspirant, must test every vision, inspiration, or clairvoyant image against the unchanging laws of creation. Guiding principles. 1. Freedom from emotion and desire. Genuine perception is never colored by fear, wish, or personal ambition. 2. Consistency with natural laws. True clairvoyance never contradicts the laws of nature, but reveals their higher context. 3. Fruits of clarity. Real seeing brings peace, clarity, and purpose. False seeing leaves confusion, fear, and dependency. 5. The way forward for researchers and seekers. For psychologists and neuroscientists, modern research on subconscious processing, memory formation, and suggestion should not lead to cynicism but rather to discernment, helping to separate authentic perception from illusion. For psychics and spiritual teachers, humility and rigorous self-testing are essential. Not every image or impression is truth, most are mixtures of inner residue and suggestion. For religious devotees and occultists, trust not in visions alone, but in the living truth of God's laws. The highest seeing will always harmonize with love, justice, and the order of creation. Closing reflection. Abdrushan's warning stands firm. Most of what passes as clairvoyance is nothing more than self-made images, products of suggestion, or collective mirages. Yet, in this warning lies liberation. For it clears the fog and directs the earnest seeker to what is real, perception born of the Spirit, uncolored by human subconsciousness, and resting in the radiant laws of God. Chapter 5. Time Concepts and Clairvoyant Perception. One of the greatest confusions in both scientific inquiry and spiritual practices is the question of time. Physicists debate whether time is linear or relative. Psychologists struggle with the subjective experience of time in altered states of consciousness, and clairvoyants often report visions of past, present, or future that appear interwoven in baffling ways. It is here that many fall into error, creating dogmas or half-baked theories to explain phenomena that are better understood when we consider the immutable laws of creation. Abdrushan makes it clear. The spiritual worlds are structured in such a way that time does not operate as it does on Earth. What we call time is a function of the earthly plane, bound to rotation, revolution, and measurement through matter. In higher planes, what exists is movement and sequence, but not time in the human sense. Thus, clairvoyants who penetrate beyond the material world often encounter impressions outside of earthly chronology. They may see events not yet occurred, or long past, because their inner eye touches realities where linear time dissolves. 1. The scientific confusion around time. Modern physics, especially after Einstein's theory of relativity, acknowledges that time is not absolute. Experiments such as the Haffel-Keating atomic clock experiment 1971, where synchronized atomic clocks showed different readings after flying around the Earth, prove that time dilates depending on motion and gravity. In quantum mechanics, phenomena like quantum entanglement suggest that particles can influence each other instantaneously, defying temporal separation. Yet, science still attempts to unify these observations into theories that fit within human frameworks of time, often ignoring the deeper truth: time is a construct of matter. This is why clairvoyant perceptions cannot be adequately explained by physics alone. They involve crossing into a region where earthly time has no jurisdiction. 2. Psychological perspectives on time alteration. Psychologists have documented states where time seems distorted. In trauma, seconds can feel like hours. Under psychedelics like LSD or psilocybin, users report a collapse of past and future into an eternal now. Neurological studies of meditation show similar effects. Practitioners in deep states lose temporal orientation, experiencing timelessness. What science labels as temporal distortion is, in many cases, the psyche loosening its strict attachment to the brain's rhythm-bound perception of time. This partially explains why clairvoyants report visions outside normal chronology. However, without the guiding knowledge of spiritual law, psychologists reduce these states to mere neurochemical anomalies, missing their deeper meaning. 3. Clairvoyance and the appearance of the future. One of the gravest errors in clairvoyant circles is the absolute interpretation of future visions. Clairvoyants may glimpse threads of events yet unrealized and proclaim them as fixed destinies. This is misleading. In truth, the future is formed through the weaving of human volition, thoughts, words, and deeds that set currents in motion. Clairvoyance may reveal the tendencies of these currents, showing probabilities rather than certainties. For example, the well-documented case of Jean Dixon, an American clairvoyant, illustrates this. She correctly foresaw the assassination of President John F. Kennedy years before it occurred, yet many of her other predictions never materialized. Why? Because while certain karmic threads may ripen unavoidably, countless other possibilities shift depending on human choices. The error lies in assuming that glimpsing a probability means foretelling an unchangeable fact. 4. Religious misinterpretations of prophecy. Many religious devotees also confuse clairvoyant visions of time with divine decree. Biblical prophecies, Quranic revelations, and mystical visions across traditions are often seen as unalterable fate rather than warnings or guidance. Abdrushan stresses that spiritual law is never arbitrary. What unfolds is the result of sowing and reaping. Prophetic visions often unveil consequences of prevailing tendencies, meant to prompt correction. If people change, the prophecy itself can dissolve, for the threads that would have brought it to fulfillment no longer hold. History provides examples. In the book of Jonah, the city of Nineveh was warned of imminent destruction. The people repented, and the prophecy was annulled. This illustrates how time-related visions are not static but contingent upon free will. 5. Errors of metaphysics and New Age thought. Modern metaphysical movements often misuse the concept of timelessness, claiming that the future already exists in parallel universes or that one can collapse timelines through visualization. While such ideas carry fragments of truth, they are distorted. The laws of creation do not allow bypassing the process of sowing and reaping. A human being cannot simply jump into a preferable future. He must set in motion the inner and outer causes that lead to it. Clairvoyant glimpses of alternate paths should inspire responsible action, not passive fantasy. 6. The correct understanding. Clairvoyance in relation to time must therefore be understood as follows. The past exists as indelible imprints in the ethereal world, accessible to clairvoyant perception. The present is the active weaving of threads through human volition. The future is visible only as tendencies, possibilities, and ripening consequences. Errors arise when any of these is mistaken for the other, or when visions are absolutized without acknowledging the living, dynamic interplay of human will and spiritual law. 7. Modern applications. For the earnest psychologist, scientist, or spiritual teacher, the lesson is clear. When dealing with clairvoyance, reports of timeless states, or altered temporal perception, one must always consider the laws governing the beyond. The scientific tools of today, functional MRI scans, quantum physics models, AI simulations, cannot fully explain clairvoyance because they are bound to matter. Only when combined with knowledge of the immutable spiritual laws can these investigations bear true fruit. Chapter 6. Clairvoyance and the Laws of Truth. Clairvoyance, in all its forms, cannot stand apart from the immutable laws of creation. Whether through flashes of intuition, visions of departed souls, or symbolic dream images, what is perceived must be weighed and tested against the standard of truth. Abdrushan emphasized that the essence of truth is harmony with the laws of God, which work unchangingly in creation. Whenever clairvoyant experiences or psychic interpretations deviate from these laws, they inevitably mislead, no matter how impressive or dramatic they may seem. In our age, this principle is all the more important. Never has the world been so saturated with information, images, and digital realities that blur the line between the true and the false. Artificial intelligence now generates visions indistinguishable from reality. Deepfakes can create the illusion of events that never happened, and entire communities online are misled by fabricated experiences. Just as the inexperienced clairvoyant of the past mistook symbolic images for literal truth, modern seekers today face the risk of confusing artificially produced illusions with genuine spiritual perception. The unchanging law of correspondence. The Grail Message stresses that perception in the beyond is governed by the law of correspondence. Every image, form, or symbol carries a meaning that reflects spiritual realities. Yet it is never the thing itself. For example, when a clairvoyant sees a lion in vision, it does not mean an actual lion is present. It symbolizes strength, courage, or a specific quality emanating from the soul or environment. To take the image literally would be a grave error. Psychologists today encounter a similar principle in dream interpretation. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes, symbols that arise from the collective unconscious, representing truths too deep for words. A dream of water, for example, might symbolize unconscious emotions, transformation, or rebirth. But just as Jung warned against rigid interpretations, Abdrushan reminds us that only through spiritual discernment can the true meaning of symbols be grasped. Real-life cases show how misunderstanding symbols can mislead. In 1997, the Heaven's Gate cult in California interpreted visions and symbolic teachings literally, believing a comet carried a spaceship that would transport their souls. Their tragic mass suicide revealed how easily symbolic perception, if taken as literal truth, leads to destruction. Clairvoyance without discernment is no different. Scientific parallels. hallucination and misperception. Modern neuroscience sheds light on why images, whether from brain activity, psychic perception, or higher realms, are not always reliable in themselves. Studies on hallucinations in patients with temporal lobe epilepsy reveal vivid visions, sometimes of heavenly beings, landscapes, or geometric forms. These visions feel absolutely real to the experiencer, yet they are generated by electrical misfiring in the brain. Similarly, psychedelic research with substances like psilocybin or DMT shows subjects encountering entities, landscapes, or even receiving messages. While these experiences can be transformative, they are highly subjective. Scientists warn that while they may open the door to spiritual exploration, they must not be mistaken for objective truth. This confirms Abdrushan's teaching. Only by testing perceptions against the laws of creation can one distinguish between misleading projections and genuine insight. In both neuroscience and spiritual teaching, the warning is the same: do not confuse the image for the reality. The law of truth is a measuring rod. Abdrushan gave mankind a clear directive: truth must be the measuring rod for all psychic and clairvoyant experiences. But how is truth recognized? He points to the inner resonance of the human spirit with the laws of God, justice, love, purity, and clarity. An image or message that contradicts these qualities cannot come from the light, no matter how dazzling it appears. This is the same principle courts of law use when evaluating witness testimony. Not all that is seen or remembered is accurate. Multiple perspectives must be weighed against established facts and laws. Likewise, clairvoyants, spiritists, and metaphysicians must measure their experiences against the laws of truth. Anything sowing fear, pride, domination, or confusion must be discarded as illusion. Case study: Marian apparitions. Consider the reported Marian apparitions at Medjugorje, Bosnia, beginning in 1981. Millions of pilgrims have visited the site, claiming healings, visions, and conversions. Yet the Catholic Church has hesitated to endorse the visions fully, precisely because of contradictions in messages over the decades. Some statements attributed to the Virgin contradict Catholic doctrine, sowing division. Measured against Abdrushan's standard, one must ask: do the messages align with truth? Do they uplift toward purity, love, and responsibility, or do they foster dependence on emotional sensationalism? The lack of clarity here shows why discernment is indispensable. Without it, seekers become dependent on phenomena instead of deepening their own spiritual recognition. The challenge for today's seekers. For modern psychologists, metaphysicians, and spiritual teachers, the danger lies in confusing phenomena with essence. A psychic reading that dazzles with accuracy, a clairvoyant vision filled with color, or a channeled message brimming with love can still mislead if not anchored in truth. This is why Abdrushan warns: the path to genuine knowledge lies not in chasing visions but in aligning one's life with the laws of creation. The fruits of such alignment, inner peace, clarity, strength, and service, are the only trustworthy evidence of genuine connection with the light. Key lessons for today. 1. Symbol does not equal reality. Clairvoyant images are symbolic, not literal. Discernment is required. 2. Science confirms limits. Hallucinations, dreams, and drug-induced visions show how unreliable perception alone can be. 3. Measure by truth. Every vision or message must align with the eternal laws of God, justice, love, and clarity. 4. Avoid sensationalism. Chasing phenomena without discernment leads to deception and destruction. 5. Focus on life alignment. The safest path is not more clairvoyance, but deeper living in harmony with divine laws. Closing reflection. In a world increasingly fascinated by altered states of consciousness, AI-generated illusions, and mystical experiences, seekers must remember that truth does not lie in appearances. As Abdrushan declared, the light does not need spectacles to prove itself. It manifests quietly in the harmony of life lived rightly. Clairvoyance, properly understood, becomes a humble tool for service, not a stage for human vanity or curiosity. Chapter 7. The limits of mediumship and the path to true spiritual knowledge. Mediumship and clairvoyance often appear as gateways to higher truths. Many who experience these states, whether as mediums, channels, or seers, believe they are conduits of divine wisdom. Abdrushan, however, makes clear in the Grail Message that these experiences are not necessarily proof of spiritual enlightenment. In fact, without discernment, such phenomena often entangle seekers in error, delusion, and bondage to lower forces. Today, this warning is more urgent than ever. The explosion of online, psychic readings, New Age movements, and spiritual influencers has created an environment where many confuse mediumship with higher knowledge. But genuine spiritual wisdom cannot be obtained through altered states of consciousness alone, nor through blind reliance on unseen voices. It must be anchored in the immutable laws of creation, discerned through clear recognition, moral integrity, and inner awakening. 1. The dependency trap of mediumship. Mediums and clairvoyants often describe themselves as passive vessels, allowing spirit guides, ascended masters, or energies to speak through them. While such communications may contain fragments of truth, Abdrushan highlights that this passivity often becomes a danger. Instead of active spiritual growth, the individual becomes dependent on outside influences, frequently from lower spheres that mimic higher light. Recent research in psychology supports this. Studies on trance mediumship, e.g., published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, 2020, reveal that many mediums experience dissociation, temporary states where normal critical faculties are suspended. This leaves them vulnerable to self-deception, unconscious fabrication, or manipulation by suggestion. In real life, entire groups have been led astray by charismatic mediums claiming to channel extraterrestrials, divine beings, or lost civilizations. For example, the infamous Heaven's Gate group in the 1990s followed messages allegedly channeled from higher beings, only to meet a tragic mass suicide. The law of spiritual freedom cannot support blind submission to voices from unseen worlds. Man was created to stand upright in recognition, not to abdicate his will to others. 2. The mirage of higher teachers. A common theme in modern clairvoyance and channeling is the claim of contact with exalted entities, archangels, ascended masters, or cosmic councils. Yet Abdrushan explains that true messengers of light never bypass human responsibility, nor do they flatter human vanity with fanciful revelations. Contemporary history shows countless failed predictions from such masters. The New Age movement of the 1980s and 1990s was filled with channelings predicting global ascension events, apocalyptic transformations, or the mass landing of extraterrestrials, none of which occurred. Even today, entire online communities revolve around promised downloads from higher dimensions, yet decades pass without verifiable evidence. This exposes the subtle danger. Seekers place their trust in unverifiable promises instead of developing their own inner clarity. In science, such reliance on unverifiable data would be dismissed as pseudoscience. In spirituality, it should likewise be weighed against the firm reality of creation's laws, which alone provide consistency and certainty. 3. Distinguishing between inner intuition and external influences. The human being possesses an inner compass, the voice of intuition. Abdrushan stresses that it is through this faculty, not through external, spirit messages, that man can align himself with truth. Intuition connects directly to the spirit, which is rooted in creation and bound to God's will. By contrast, mediumistic voices often stem from the animistic realms, where countless disembodied souls linger, often projecting their desires, fears, and unresolved passions onto receptive individuals. These voices may sound wise, but their messages are colored by human limitation. For example, a documented case published by the Society for Psychical Research (SPR) described a medium who relayed teachings from a supposed enlightened being. Later investigation revealed the entity to be a deceased professor, still attached to his earthly opinions, mistakenly presenting them as universal truths. Here lies the corrective. Psychologists, researchers, and seekers must develop methods to distinguish between intuition, which uplifts, clarifies, and harmonizes with truth, and psychic impressions, which confuse, flatter, or contradict themselves. 4. The ethical dimension. Responsibility of seers. The greatest error in clairvoyance lies not in perceiving otherworldly phenomena, but in interpreting them wrongly and using them irresponsibly. Abdrushan emphasizes that true spiritual seeing requires purity of intent, humility, and strict self-examination. History is filled with tragic examples of clairvoyants who abused their gifts. The Nazi regime notoriously exploited mediums and occult advisors, such as Carl Maria Williget, who claimed clairvoyant visions of ancient Germanic traditions. His influence fueled pseudo-mystical racial ideologies that justified horrific crimes. This demonstrates how easily clairvoyance, when misused, can serve destructive ends. Even in modern times, psychic fraud is rampant. In 2021, U.S. authorities charged multiple self-proclaimed clairvoyants for scamming clients out of millions by pretending to remove curses. Such cases show how spiritual gifts, divorced from moral responsibility, become tools of exploitation rather than service. 5. Toward a higher standard of spiritual research. For psychology, metaphysics, and spiritual science to mature, a new discipline is needed, one that applies rigorous discernment while respecting the reality of non-material perception. Abdrushan's teaching offers this foundation. Reject passivity. True knowledge requires active recognition, not blind acceptance of voices. Test by creation's laws. Every spiritual phenomenon must be weighed against the immutable laws of cause and effect, sowing and reaping, and harmony of creation. Uphold ethics. No clairvoyant perception is valid if it leads to fear, exploitation, or escapism. Cultivate intuition. The pure inner voice is the only reliable compass, untouched by deception. By following these principles, seekers can rise above the errors of mediumship and direct themselves toward genuine spiritual knowledge. Closing thought. Mediumship and clairvoyance, though often sensational, are not ends in themselves. They are fragments of perception that, without proper guidance, can entangle the soul in illusion. The path to truth lies not in dependence on unseen voices, but in the awakening of the spirit within man, where clarity, certainty, and connection to the light are found. Chapter 8. The Dangers of Misinterpretation in Clairvoyance. Clairvoyance, like every genuine spiritual faculty, is meant to serve humanity as a tool of enlightenment and protection. It is a window into realities beyond the visible world, allowing glimpses into the subtle forces that shape our existence. Yet history, both ancient and modern, reveals how often these glimpses are misinterpreted, distorted, or sensationalized. What was meant to illuminate frequently descends into confusion, fear, or manipulation. This misuse has not only discredited the subject in the eyes of science but has also left countless seekers astray. 1. The problem of symbolism misunderstood. One of the gravest dangers in clairvoyance lies in the symbolic nature of many visions. Rarely are perceptions in the astral or ethereal planes delivered in direct, literal forms. Instead, they are clothed in images, archetypes, and forms that mirror the inner states of both the perceiver and the object observed. Without proper training, the clairvoyant may confuse symbol for fact. For example, a clairvoyant might perceive a dark cloud surrounding a person. Instead of interpreting it as an indication of inner turmoil, unresolved trauma, or moral decline, they may announce it as an omen of death. Such misinterpretations are not uncommon and can cause needless fear, strain relationships, and even alter the course of a person's life. In psychology, the phenomenon is comparable to dream analysis. Symbols are often personal, contextual, and layered. A Jungian psychologist recognizes archetypes but cautions against rigid, universal interpretations. Similarly, clairvoyance must be approached with humility and discernment. 2. The trap of personal projection. Clairvoyants are not immune to their own desires, fears, or prejudices. Often, what they perceive is unconsciously colored by the contents of their psyche. This projection can result in distorted messages that reflect more of the clairvoyant than the subject being observed. Modern neuroscience provides insight here. Cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias or expectancy effect, demonstrate how perception itself is influenced by expectation. A clairvoyant anticipating danger may see danger where none exists. Abdrushan warned of this very danger. The vision becomes a mirror of the seer, not of reality. Consider the numerous failed apocalyptic predictions by self-proclaimed visionaries in recent decades. From the year 2000, Y2K doomsday, to the Mayan calendar panic of 2012, individuals projected inner anxieties about societal instability onto cosmic timelines. Millions were misled, and trust in spiritual insight was further eroded. 3. Misuse for power and gain. Perhaps the most harmful misinterpretations are deliberate. History is replete with individuals who exploited supposed clairvoyant abilities to manipulate followers, extort money, or gain political power. From fraudulent seances in the late 19th century to modern, psychic hotlines, and social media gurus charging exorbitant fees for fabricated visions, the danger is not just error but outright deception. The FBI in the United States has documented cases of psychic fraud, where vulnerable individuals were convinced to pay large sums to remove supposed curses. Victims lost not only money but also emotional well-being. Such abuses reinforce skepticism and make genuine study of clairvoyance more difficult. 4. Collective misinterpretations in religion and occultism. Beyond individual misuse, entire groups and movements have erred through collective misinterpretation. Many cults began with a visionary leader who misread his or her experiences as divine mandates. The result was blind obedience, often ending in tragedy. The Jonestown Massacre, 1978, stands as a chilling reminder. Jim Jones claimed prophetic insight, yet his visions were nothing more than the amplification of personal paranoia and lust for control. His followers, unable to discern, misinterpreted his delusions as revelation, costing over 900 lives. Even in less extreme cases, misinterpreted clairvoyant experiences have seeded doctrines that hardened into dogma, dividing humanity rather than uniting it. 5. The path toward correct interpretation. The dangers of misinterpretation do not negate the reality of clairvoyance. Instead, they highlight the urgent need for inner purity. Only a mind and soul striving for truth can receive unclouded impressions. Selfish motives distort perception. Discernment and testing. Every vision should be tested against reason, the laws of nature, and moral truth. Abdrushan emphasized, truth never contradicts itself. Integration with knowledge. Insights should not be isolated from the wider body of knowledge, scientific, psychological, and spiritual. The seer who refuses correction or collaboration is most prone to error. Humility. True clairvoyants acknowledge the limits of their perception. They present impressions as possibilities, not absolute decrees. 6. Modern applications and safeguards. Today, many professionals are seeking responsible ways to approach extraordinary perception. Some psychologists, like Dr. Stanley Krippner, have studied anomalous experiences without ridicule, acknowledging their subjective value while warning against literal absolutism. Similarly, spiritual teachers increasingly emphasize discernment, test the spirits, as the Bible puts it. Technological tools also help. For example, EEG studies of mediums in Brazil 2012, Universidade de São Paulo, revealed altered brain activity during trance states, supporting that something is happening, though interpretation of the content must still be cautious. If psychology, neuroscience, and spiritual science work together, humanity could build frameworks that allow clairvoyant phenomena to be understood, without the distortions of ego, fear, or exploitation. Closing reflection. The errors of misinterpretation in clairvoyance have cost humanity dearly, in broken trust, shattered lives, and obstructed progress. But just as a distorted mirror does not negate the reality of light, these errors do not invalidate the existence of true clairvoyant perception. The challenge is one of responsibility, discipline, and humility. By grounding every vision in truth, and aligning interpretation with the immutable laws of creation, clairvoyance can become what it was always meant to be, a sacred instrument of guidance and service. Chapter 9. The Boundary Between Clairvoyance and Madness. One of the most persistent difficulties in both psychology and spirituality is distinguishing authentic clairvoyant perception from delusion, hallucination, or outright mental illness. Abdrushan, in his lectures, warned that confusion on this boundary often leads to tragedy, both for the individual and for the society that tries to understand them. Today, with advancements in psychiatry, neurology, and cognitive science, we are in a better position to observe this thin line, though the riddle has by no means been fully solved. What remains lacking is the higher knowledge of the spiritual laws that govern perception, which can illuminate this boundary far better than mere clinical data. 1. The overlapping symptoms. From the perspective of clinical psychiatry, certain symptoms of clairvoyance, such as hearing voices, seeing visions, or perceiving presences unseen by others, mirror symptoms of schizophrenia, psychosis, or temporal lobe epilepsy. The similarity is so striking that many clairvoyants in history, from Joan of Arc to Emanuel Swedenborg, would likely be diagnosed today as mentally ill if judged only through a medical lens. Case study: Modern Psychiatry. In a 2017 study published in Schizophrenia Bulletin, researchers found that some people who hear voices but show no other symptoms of psychosis, sometimes called non-clinical voice hearers, are actually stable, functional, and often consider their experiences enriching rather than pathological. Observation. This suggests that hearing or seeing beyond ordinary perception is not inherently a sign of madness. The difference lies in integration, whether the experience harmonizes with the rest of one's life, or disrupts it. Abdrushan explains this distinction more clearly. True clairvoyance flows in harmony with the immutable laws of creation. It strengthens clarity, responsibility, and inner calm. Madness, by contrast, creates confusion, contradiction, and detachment from reality. Science perceives the outer symptoms, but without knowledge of the laws of spiritual perception, it cannot reliably separate one from the other. 2. The role of purity and orientation. In Abdrushan's view, a key factor is the inner orientation of the individual. A clairvoyant who is inwardly pure, striving toward truth, will attract genuine currents of light, which may grant authentic glimpses into the beyond. An impure or self-seeking individual, however, becomes a prey to distorted projections of his own subconscious, or worse, parasitic entities from the astral plane. Modern psychology would describe this as the intrusion of unresolved trauma, subconscious complexes, or dissociative states. Example: modern parallels. Studies in transpersonal psychology, e.g., Stanislav Grof's work with non-ordinary states of consciousness, show that many so-called spiritual emergencies are not mental illness but crises of transformation. When handled responsibly, they can lead to greater integration. But when mishandled, they can degenerate into psychosis. Lesson: what differentiates a breakdown from a breakthrough is orientation and guidance. Abdrushan therefore insists that only when the individual's will is anchored in humility, service, and truth can clairvoyance unfold without danger. Otherwise, what appears as clairvoyance is often mere self-delusion magnified by spiritual law. 3. The dangers of misdiagnosis. A society ignorant of spiritual reality runs two risks. 1. Dismissing true clairvoyance as insane, thereby silencing sources of genuine knowledge. 2. Exalting delusional individuals as prophets, leading to destructive cults and mass deception. Both errors have occurred repeatedly throughout history. In the Middle Ages, women with heightened sensitivity were burned as witches, though some may have been genuinely clairvoyant. In modern times, charismatic delusional leaders have led followers into mass suicides, as seen in Jonestown 1978, or Heaven's Gate 1997. In both cases, failure to discern true from false perception led to catastrophe. Science alone cannot prevent such tragedies, since it denies the existence of genuine clairvoyance. Religion alone often fails, because it may embrace blind faith without discernment. Only knowledge of the laws of creation, as given by abdrution, provides the clear criteria: harmony, humility, service, and verifiable truth in daily life. 4. Neurological correlations without reductionism. Recent neuroscience has identified correlations between mystical or visionary experiences and brain activity, particularly in the temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and default mode network. But correlation does not equal causation. The brain is the instrument, not the origin, of perception. Just as a radio receiver must vibrate to capture invisible waves, so too must the brain vibrate to register impressions from subtler planes. Scientific example. In near-death experiences (NDEs), veridical perceptions have been documented. Patients describe events that occurred while their brain activity was clinically absent, as in the famous Pam Reynolds case during brain surgery in 1991. This cannot be explained by hallucination or brain chemistry alone. Abdrution's view. The spirit perceives directly, using the brain as an instrument. When the instrument malfunctions, as in mental illness, perceptions become distorted. But when the spirit is clear and strong, genuine perceptions shine through, even if science cannot yet explain them. Thus, the task of science is not to dismiss, but to study without prejudice, acknowledging both genuine cases and pathological ones. 5. Guidance for seekers and researchers. For psychologists, psychiatrists, and spiritual teachers, the practical question remains: how can one discern authentic clairvoyance from madness? Abdrution provides criteria that remain relevant today. 1. Clarity. True clairvoyance never contradicts itself or leads into confusion. Madness is chaotic and contradictory. 2. Moral elevation. Genuine perception inspires responsibility, humility, and constructive action. Delusion inflates ego or inspires destructive behavior. 3. Verifiable fruits. Clairvoyant insights should bear fruit in life, helping others, solving problems, or bringing peace. If it leads to fear, harm, or obsession, it is unhealthy. 4. Harmony with natural laws. Authentic perception aligns with observable creation, never urging violation of natural or moral law. By applying these standards, seekers and scientists alike can avoid both gullibility and dismissal, navigating the boundary with wisdom. Conclusion. Bridging science and spirit. The boundary between clairvoyance and madness is not merely a clinical puzzle but a spiritual challenge. Where science sees neurons and hallucinations, abdrution reveals laws of attraction, purity, and spiritual orientation. Both perspectives must be brought into dialogue, not to merge one into the other, but to prevent errors on both sides. For it is only in this balance that humanity can truly recognize the difference between genuine vision and destructive delusion. Chapter 10. The Path to Clarity, From Illusion to True Vision. In bringing this discussion to a focal point, we must confront the central error that has plagued clairvoyance, mysticism, psychic research, and even scientific inquiry into consciousness: the assumption that vision equals truth. For centuries, both religious devotees and modern scientists alike have fallen into the trap of believing that perception, whether through inner sight, laboratory data, or altered states of consciousness, is synonymous with reality. Abdrution warned that this confusion between subjective impressions and objective truth is the root of most errors surrounding clairvoyance. 1. Illusion in the garb of vision. Human perception, whether physical or extrasensory, remains limited and conditioned by the individual's state of soul, intellect, and moral integrity. A psychic may describe colorful landscapes, spirit guides, or symbols, and yet what they perceive may simply be reflections of their own subconscious or emotional state, rather than objective spiritual truth. Modern neuroscience has confirmed that the brain can generate vivid hallucinations during states of heightened stress, meditation, or trauma. For example, in a 2014 study at Imperial College London, subjects under the influence of psilocybin reported visions of beings of light, or alternate realms. Yet brain scans showed predictable neural activity corresponding to the visual cortex, revealing that such visions were not external but brain-based reconstructions. This validates abdrution's warning: Not everything seen in inner vision originates from the spiritual reality, it can be self-generated imagery. 2. The danger of blind faith in perception. Many spiritual movements of today, from New Age circles to certain charismatic Christian groups, still operate on the principle, what I see must be true. Yet history is full of disillusionment caused by misplaced trust in visions. Consider the case of Heaven's Gate in 1997, where members followed the visions of their leader, who claimed clairvoyant insight about a spacecraft accompanying the Hale-Bopp comet. The tragic result was mass suicide. Abdrushon's corrective is crucial here. Clairvoyance without clear discrimination, spiritual humility, and knowledge of the laws of creation will always lead into deception, self-exaltation, or ruin. 3. Science and the mirage of certainty. Even modern science, often regarded as the pinnacle of rationality, is not immune to illusion. Quantum physics experiments, such as the delayed choice quantum eraser, 1999, demonstrate how observation itself alters results. Many physicists, seeking metaphysical explanations, have proposed wild theories of multiple realities or observer-created universes. Yet often these are interpretations shaped more by human imagination than grounded in immutable law. Here Abdrushon provides clarity. Human observation does not create reality but merely reveals or distorts it depending on the purity of the observer's instrument, the soul. Just as a microscope cannot invent what is not there but can distort if faulty, so too the inner perception of man must be purified before it can serve truth. 4. The criterion of truth. So how then can seekers, psychologists, spiritual teachers, or scientists, distinguish truth from illusion? Abdrushon directs us to the eternal laws of creation. 1. Consistency with natural law. True spiritual vision will never contradict the natural order observable in creation. A vision claiming the suspension of cause and effect, for instance, must be false. 2. Moral elevation. Authentic perception leads to ennoblement, humility, and service. False visions breed pride, fear, or self-glorification. 3. Universality. Truth resonates across all cultures, religions, and disciplines. If a clairvoyance message appeals only to a sect or personality cult, it cannot be genuine. Modern psychology echoes this. Clinical studies on mystical experiences, Johns Hopkins, 2019, reveal that the long-term fruits of an experience, whether it increases compassion, mental health, and moral clarity, are the most reliable indicators of authenticity. This aligns perfectly with Abdrushon's principle that truth is known by its effects, not its appearances. 5. The role of the earnest researcher. Today's earnest psychologist, metaphysician, scientist, or devotee must adopt a new attitude. Instead of asking, "What did I see?" the higher question is, "What truth does this perception point toward within the immutable laws of creation?" Instead of glorifying the phenomenon of clairvoyance itself, seekers must learn to use it as a tool, subject to reason, humility, and verification against spiritual law. This requires courage, because it means letting go of cherished illusions. It demands discipline, because it places responsibility on the seer to constantly purify their motives. And it requires faith. Not blind faith in visions, but living faith in the justice and wisdom of God's eternal laws. 6. The path to true vision. Abdrushon makes clear, true seeing is not a gift of nature, nor a plaything of the curious. It is the natural result of inner purity and alignment with the will of God. Clairvoyance, in its highest and truest form, is not about colors, symbols, or psychic tricks. It is about perceiving reality as it is, through the clarity of a soul free from ego, delusion, and desire. The path to this vision is therefore moral and spiritual, not technical. It lies in living in truth, in obedience to the laws of creation, and in cultivating humility before the grandeur of life. Final thought of the chapter. Clairvoyance, stripped of illusion, is not spectacle but responsibility. The task of our age is to free vision from the shadows of subjective fancy, scientific reductionism, and religious distortion, and to let it shine forth as a servant of truth. Only then will mankind advance beyond riddles and half-truths into clarity. Conclusion. Reclaiming the light of true knowledge. The path we have walked together through this book has not been one of idle speculation or personal theorizing. It has been a sober confrontation with the vast misconceptions, half-truths, and often dangerous illusions that surround the subject of clairvoyance. For centuries, humanity has oscillated between blind belief and cynical denial, either idolizing psychic phenomena without discernment or ridiculing them without understanding. In both extremes, truth has been obscured. Abdrushan, in his lectures, Errors About Clairvoyance, and Various Aspects of Clairvoyance, provided a compass that points unerringly toward clarity. His teaching reveals that clairvoyance, when rightly understood, is neither superstition nor an arbitrary gift bestowed by chance, but a lawful capacity governed by the immutable order of creation. It is not a toy for entertainment, nor a shortcut to wisdom, nor a stage for self-glorification. It is one of many faculties that belong to the human spirit, a faculty that can serve light or shadow depending on how it is approached. Bridging Abdrushan's knowledge in today's world. In bringing his principles into dialogue with contemporary science, psychology, and spiritual practice, we have seen how many unsolved riddles of our age, whether in neuroscience, consciousness studies, parapsychology, or interfaith spirituality, gain coherence when viewed through the Grail Message. For example, psychology and neuroscience wrestle with the hard problem of consciousness. The Grail Message clarifies that consciousness is not a product of the brain but a manifestation of the spirit working through the brain. Physics and quantum studies reveal dimensions of reality beyond sensory perception. Abdrushan's explanations provide a framework for understanding these layers as part of the lawful gradations of creation. Religious traditions often conflict about visions, revelations, and prophecy. With clarity from the Grail Message, we see that not all visions are from the light, and that discernment based on the laws of creation is indispensable. Modern occultism and psychic movements continue to stumble on the same errors of pride, commercial exploitation, and misuse that Abdrushan warned against nearly a century ago. The corrective knowledge is still the same today: humility, service, and alignment with truth. The responsibility of the seeker. The world is now flooded with clairvoyants, mediums, and self-styled spiritual teachers. Technology has amplified this phenomenon, with social media serving as a global stage for every dream, vision, or mystical impression. Amid this flood, seekers must exercise discernment. The responsibility is no longer only on the clairvoyant but also on the listener, researcher, and devotee. The central principle that emerges is this: truth must be verifiable in life, in the laws of nature, and in the fruits it produces. No genuine clairvoyant insight will ever contradict these laws. No authentic spiritual message will ever encourage dependence, idolatry, or escape from responsibility. The call of this hour. We live in an age of confusion but also of opportunity. The riddles that haunt science, religion, and metaphysics will not be solved by more sophisticated machines or by louder voices claiming revelation. They will only be solved when humanity learns again to live in harmony with the immutable spiritual laws that govern existence. The Grail Message points to these laws with unparalleled clarity. It strips away illusion, corrects error, and gives the earnest seeker a foundation that no shifting theory can undermine. It is a call to humility before the vastness of creation, to purity in thought and motive, and to service in the light. A final word. To the psychologist, the metaphysician, the scientist, the clairvoyant, the religious devotee, and the earnest seeker, the choice before you is not whether clairvoyance exists. It does, as surely as gravity exists, but whether you will handle it in truth or in error. The former leads to illumination, the latter to confusion. May this book, drawing from the timeless wisdom of Abdrushan and enriched with the verifiable signs of our present age, serve as a guidepost. Not as a final word, but as a signpost pointing upward, away from the labyrinth of theories and into the clear light of living truth. For in the end, clairvoyance is not the goal. Truth is. And truth, as the Grail Message reminds us, is nothing less than living in the will of God.